Welcome everybody to the February 24th, 2020 Van Wert City Council meeting. We will begin with our invocation by Pastor Keith Stoller, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody would please rise.
Heavenly Father, we are certainly thankful to come to you this evening in Jesus' name. Thankful, God, for the offer and the call to public ministry. You've called each of the council members and the administration to. And as we do each evening, we pray for your Spirit's wisdom to guide the discussion, guide the decisions. May they be compassionate and guided by your Spirit. We also give you praise, Father, for the wonderful turnout of public. And Father, as they participate in the discussions, may your Spirit guide them as well. Lord, we love you. We give you praise for our life in the Lord Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. Veronica, please call the roll.
Mr. Marshall?
Present.
Mr. Callis?
Present.
Mr. Penton?
Present.
Mr. Aigler?
Here.
Mrs. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here.
All right, everybody should have a copy of the agenda for this evening. There are a couple of changes or additions. First, under resolutions and ordinances, this is on page 2. The ordinance number 20-02-010 should say on an emergency basis. Even though that we're planning on reading that 3 times, that should be on an emergency so that we don't have to wait the 30 days at the end. Ordinance number 11 should also be on here. That was an oversight by me. All of you have a copy of Ordinance 11. That's the bond ordinance. And then make a special note, we will be going into executive session after the reading of resolutions and ordinances. We will come out of executive session and have decisions to make. So we will be voting, we will have something to address.
What's the issue?
It is a contract negotiation. And then I have a question, Jay.
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-02-009. Did you want that? That's the street painting.
No, 9 is ODOT.
That's the ODOT.
That is ODOT.
Thank you, it's not.
I didn't request it that way, but if we could amend it to go ahead and do it as an emergency, that would be helpful, because we might as well get it out for bid and take advantage.
Okay, so
You're talking about the street painting.
so 6 then.
Yeah,
Number 6. So, Mr. Hellman, when we get to your committee, if you would ask that 06 be amended to be placed as an emergency, and then we can address it at that point, if you would just ask to add that language to it.
Sounds good.
That might remove from the consent agenda, but
Yeah, we'll probably have to remove it from the consent agenda and put it over on regular because of that, but to make that proper. Okay, that's all. Those are the corrections that I missed. Anybody have any other additions or corrections to the agenda?
did you say 008? That needs to be under parks.
It is on the agenda.
it's on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have it when I sent it out, because
That's
I
all right.
couldn't remember if it was parks or if it was.
Yeah, it's under parks on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else see anything that needs addressed on the agenda? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the amended agenda? Mrs. Murgy, second by Mr. Davis. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Berge?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Aigler?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Okay, everybody was provided the minutes to our last meeting dated February 11th, 2020. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? We did note in the FOI, Freedom of Information instead of FOA.
The other
Did you have
one,
something else, Ken?
well, a bit of a clarification under judiciary and annexation, talking about people who would want to run as a member of the Charter Commission. Council does decide how many signatures are required, but when it talks about an individual or group petition, council does not decide that. The Secretary of State offers both options, and the individual decides whether to do it as a group or as an individual.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any other additions, corrections?
Move to accept as
Move to
corrected.
accept as corrected by Mrs. Murgy, second by Mr. Callis. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Abler?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, comments, communications, and petitions. I have a few to go through before we get to the individuals that are noted on the agenda. I received a letter from Robert Sprague, who's the Ohio Treasurer, simply congratulating me on on us, I guess I'm assuming, congratulating everybody on their November election, introducing himself, and giving us the name of Patrick McCauley as a Public Affairs Regional Liaison of Northwestern Ohio. Jay, Mr. Kelly, I sent you an email. He had a question about what streets were being paved.
I got that.
Okay, can you reply to him, please?
I will.
I think I know the answer, but I'll let you reply that. Also, the 2019 audit has begun. I received a phone call from one of the auditors, and I believe everybody in council received an email from Brenda Miller identifying that the audit has begun. And over the last several days, over the last week or so, I have received and photocopied and tried to email or tried to have the clerk email out all emails related to Haven of Hope, for and against. To date, or at least since our last meeting, I have 26 different letters from individuals, many of which are inside the community of Van Wert, directly affected. Some are from individuals inside the county, but wanted to let us know their views. Also received a 15-page brief from Mr. Nolan, who is on the agenda. All council members should have that. So hopefully everybody has had time to read through the emails and figure out, at least get the questions answered that you wanted. Before we get into the Haven of Hope discussion, are there any other comments, communications, petitions from council not related to Haven of Hope?
No.
Now.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, is, Van Wert High School seniors do the We the People project. AP goes competition in Columbus. Regular Gov will do it at the high school. Every year I send out, or Coach Priest has sent out a email welcoming you to come to be judges that day for the seniors and the We the People. So you will be getting that this week.
What date is that? Do you know off the top of your head?
Tentatively, Wednesday the 11th.
Okay. May 11th.
March.
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 March 11th.
Okay.
Did I say May?
No, I'm putting words in your mouth, trying to figure it out.
March 11th, about 12:30 to 3, should be done by about 2:30.
Okay.
And our students really love to have the community members and leaders participate in that. So just be aware of that. That'll be coming out this week. I'm a little behind on that.
Okay. Any other comments, communications from council? All right, here's how this discussion is going to go. If you are on the agenda, which would be Chris Wilson and Jody Wilson, Ashley Balliot, and Mr. Joshua Nolan, you each have 5 minutes to address council, up to 5 minutes to address council. If you are not on the agenda, you have up to 2 minutes to address council. I'm going to, given the number of people here, I'm going to limit that to individuals that actually reside inside the city of Van Wert. If you don't reside, and simply because we ask you for your name and your address, okay? So if you reside inside the city of Van Wert, you may have 2 minutes. If you don't, we appreciate you being here and showing support for or against, but we are on limited time with this discussion. So, Mr. Chris Wilson, you may go ahead. I do have a timer up here, so I will motion to everybody when your time is getting short.
Thank you. My name is Chris Wilson. With me is my wife Jody Wilson. We reside at 503 North Market Street. Through our company, we own property located at 227 North Market Street. Hopefully you've all received our letter dated February 19th. I'd like to add a few more comments regarding the Haven of Hope zoning issue. After the February 10th council meeting, City Law Director Hatcher was quoted in local media as saying, "It needs to be defined as something. We don't have a definition for homeless shelter currently in our zoning. It has to meet some definition. If it isn't a semi-public or quasi-public use, what is it?" You have to answer that question for yourself in coming to a vote. I take exception to Mr. Hatcher's comments. City Code 150.15 states, uses not specifically listed or interpreted to be included categorically under this section, and 150.05 through 150.13 shall not be permitted except by amendment to the chapter. City Code 150.70 paragraph A addresses the variance process and says in part, in authorizing the variance, the board may attach conditions and require such guarantee or bond as it may deem necessary to assure compliance with the objections to this chapter. Our contention from the very beginning has been that a men's homeless shelter or drop-off shelter is not covered anywhere in the zoning code and is therefore a non-conforming use requiring a variance request by the Zoning Board of Appeals. This is all we've ever asked, a public forum with input from Haven of Hope, city government, and the citizens of Van Wert. The only question before council is whether or not to uphold the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's it, nothing more. If classified as falling under semi-public use, they are free to operate virtually any type of facility with absolutely no input or supervision. When considering how you will vote on the zoning issue, please keep in mind that semi-public use is permissible in all residential zoning districts as well as B2 and B3. Should you choose to overturn the Zoning Board of Appeals ruling, there is nothing stopping a similar use on Linden Drive, Elm Street, Walnut Street, or Shawnee Drive, to name a few locations. City Council has already voted once that Haven of Hope does not qualify under semi-public use, as has the Zoning Board of Appeals. In closing, the zoning codes do allow some discretion in interpreting the underlying intent of zoning regulations. We ask that you keep the welfare of our community in mind and uphold the Zoning Board of Appeals decision. Thank you.
Mrs. Wilson, did you want your additional
yes, I
time? Sure, you're both on the agenda. I just wanted to make sure.
Well, we own two properties.
No, I have you both down. I just wanted to make sure. Floor is yours.
My name is Jody Wilson. I live at 503 North Market, and my husband and I own the property at 227 North Market. My half is the nicer half. We are so deeply concerned about this drop-in shelter at 233 North Market for several reasons. Number one, there is a definite lack of concrete information about safety, policies, and procedures, other than we'll figure it out. When the Zoning Board of Appeals asked direct questions of Haven of Hope board members, the answers were, and I quote, "Our policies are nobody's business. We can do anything we want." I'll let that sink in. Repeated phone calls and emails requesting information about how Haven of Hope is planning to protect its guests and neighbors have gone unanswered, nor is there any satisfactory information on Haven of Hope's website or blog. There has been no neighborhood impact statement on how a homeless shelter will affect the North Market Street neighborhood. So I have collected information from our friend Google across the country and from communities large and small, from Los Angeles to Bucyrus, Ohio. And I'll be happy to share. The recurring and well-documented themes are these. Public health issues, from tuberculosis, influenza, and HIV to bedbugs and lice. Mental health issues. Numerous studies report that 20 to 33% of homeless people have serious mental illnesses, mostly schizophrenia and bipolar disorders. This percentage is higher among the chronically homeless. Open drug and alcohol use. Substance abuse is the #1 cause of homelessness among single adults in 68% of cities. It is also a result of homelessness, whether it's self-medication or trying to fit in with the existing homeless population. Vagrancy, vandalism, and both petty and violent crimes requiring police presence are 58% higher within 100 meters of a shelter. A homeless shelter is not a daycare center, a counseling service, nor a tax preparation business. In Haven of Hope's situation, it is not a charity. It is not listed on the Internal Revenue Service list of 501(c)(3) charities. Haven of Hope is not a church. It does not operate under the auspices of any denomination. It is not a philanthropy. It's not interested in long-term benefits. It doesn't hand out money. I absolutely believe in and support a moral imperative to care for the homeless. I also believe there is a moral imperative for our elected officials to provide due process for citizens when the mechanism is already there. Please use it. All we are asking for is for Van Wert City Council to uphold the decision it has already made, as well as the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals that will require Haven of Hope to apply for a zoning variance. This will provide a public forum for input from both Haven of Hope and the neighborhood in which it seeks to open. Thank you.
Mrs. Ashley Ballard.
Hello, my name is Ashley Ballard. Sorry if I speak a little fast. I'm trying to slow things down for you. Thanks for letting me speak this evening. I personally went to my neighbors.
Mrs. Ballard, address please.
Oh,
for a
sorry,
record.
308 North Market Street.
Thank you.
I personally went to my neighbors and local businesses that make up my neighborhood to collect signatures in agreement that Haven of Hope is not zoned properly. Out of the 55 houses that answered their doors, I was able to collect 50 signatures, which I made an individual copy for each of the council members to look over. I placed those copies in your mailbox attached with the cover letter on Friday, February 21st, 2020. The concern when talking with my neighbors was that they had no idea Haven of Hope, a men's homeless shelter / drop-in location, was going to be residing in our neighborhood. When pointing out some of the underlying compliance regulations stated on Haven of Hope's Facebook website and Facebook page and website on how they would be running their organization. For instance, being monitored by a cell phone camera, an alarm device that would be helped deter the homeless individuals from sneaking in and out, that would be heard for a 4-block radius. Each of my neighbors personally thanked me for bringing this to their attention. They then either signed an agreement with the petition or stated that they'd be looking further into Haven of Hope. The stories that were shared with me, and there were many, I personally thank Haven of Hope for allowing me to get to know my neighbors, even though I don't like the circumstances at hand. So many questions have been asked directly to Haven of Hope by several individuals around the community, and we still have not received the answers to this day. If they want the support that they continue to advocate for, then as an organization, you should be able to respond back to said asked questions or even state you don't know and will have to get back to us. Some of my concerns pertain to the fact that Haven of Hope will not accept sex offenders. Most homeless individuals do not carry any type of identification of any sort. So how will Haven of Hope handle this issue? Another major concern being the well-being of the individuals under Haven of Hope's care. Many homeless are generally more acceptable to illness, like Jody stated. Meaning in close quarters, illness can spread rapidly and pass boundaries to affect the general public. I have so many questions still unanswered, and I will not continue to wait around for such a serious organization to take form without being held accountable. When there are so many lives in the balance under Haven of Hope's control, meaning the individuals that they personally take care of and the community that resides around them. I attended Haven of Hope's community meeting held on February 17, 2020. At their meeting, where their board member openly admitted that they were naive and had no idea what an opening a drop-in location all entailed. And I do have it recorded. And this is why there has to be some type of zoning guidelines and regulations to prevent, and I quote, Haven of Hope, who, like Jody said, at the zoning board meeting, that they could do whatever they wanted. Yes, fear of the unknown is quite scary, but this isn't the place for emotion. Ultimately, what this council meeting is to decide that Haven of Hope is in incorrect zoning and to follow along with zoning board's decision that was made. I sure hope this council board follows the laws, but keeps in mind all my neighbors and their families in mind on who this will all affect. I strongly insist that council get something on the books pertaining to homeless shelters for future reference. I also ask of council why Haven of Hope has still to this day not applied for a variance. They are quick to hire a lawyer, but still fail to do their process of what is required of them. Therefore, I strongly urge council to vote in compliance with the zoning board's decision that Haven of Hope is not properly zoned, so that public forum can be then held and the public, my neighbors, can get the answers we seek and regulations can be established. I thank each of you for your time this evening and allowing me to speak.
Mr. Nolan.
Thank you. My name is Josh Nolan. I'm an attorney on behalf of Haven of Hope. A couple of things that I would like to address very quickly. Whether or not citizens currently believe that the zoning classification in place is accurate is unfortunately irrelevant to your determination. You have to apply the law as it's currently written, not as you or your residents might like it to be in the future. You certainly have the right to amend your zoning ordinance to deal with this issue as it comes before you in the future, but you can't change the law that applies to Haven of Hope as we sit here today. Now, Haven of Hope, contrary to statements that have been made, is an Ohio nonprofit corporation validly formed with Ohio. You can find those records, A, attached to the brief that I provided you as Exhibit A. You can also find them on the Ohio Secretary of State's website. And the 501c3 application with the IRS is pending, not yet approved, and therefore not listed on the IRS's website. Now, as we all know, 233 North Market Street is the location in question. That is zoned as a B3 Highway and General Business District. Highway and in the B3 zoning district, semi-public uses are considered to be a permitted use, meaning that no additional permission is required to have a permitted use, a semi-public use. It would be no different than if someone wanted to build a house in that district or in a residential district. They don't need additional consent other than complying with the building code. Section 150.03 of the Delaware Code of Ordinances defines a semi-public, also known as quasi-public use, as churches, Sunday schools, parochial schools, colleges, hospitals, and institutions of an educational, religious, charitable, philanthropic, or nonprofit nature. As you will see from the articles of incorporation filed on behalf of Haven of Hope, they're a Christian organization that is starting or attempting to build a homeless shelter to serve the public. They make no profit by law. I can't imagine a more philanthropic purpose than serving those that have the greatest need in our community. And their stated purpose specifically references their charitable and philanthropic purpose. Now, I know there was some discussion before that somehow there's an educational requirement, and I would respectfully dispute that. The fact that you've included a hospital in the definition of a semi-public use indicates that education is not a mandatory component of that. And if you read the definition, it also says that those semi-public uses shall be permitted to provide daycare or preschool services. It does not say that it's mandatory that they provide those services, only that they be allowed to. Now, as Mr. Hatcher pointed out to you in his memo, the only court in Ohio that has addressed this issue has found that a homeless shelter is a quasi-public use. Now, that case was overturned on other grounds relating to how a court processes a request for an injunction. had nothing to do with the definition of a quasi-public use. And therefore, the only authority on point in the state of Ohio is a court that has declared that, in fact, a homeless shelter is a quasi-public use, which falls under your definition, same as a semi-public use. You know, the other thing I would point out is that Van Wert already has similar services being provided to women in your community. The YWCA is located in the B2 General District and does provide emergency care services, to my understanding. And the Crisis Care Line, which provides housing services for battered women, also is located in Van Wert in your residential district. This is already in your community. It's just it's for women and not for men. Now, while City Council may wish to revisit this issue in the future, as we discussed, you have to apply what's sitting before you today. And it's pretty clear, based upon the case law that's in there in Ohio, and the simple, plain, factual analysis here, that even a proposed use of a men's homeless shelter qualifies as a semi-public use under section 150.03 of the Code of Ordinances. Now, moving on beyond, yes, sir?
1 minute.
Okay, moving into the procedural, I believe that we frankly shouldn't even be here today, that Mr. Wilson's appeal was not timely filed. The decision was made on November 6th. He had 14 days. He didn't file an appeal. He then came to you on November 23rd. Okay? He still didn't file an appeal. And now somehow on December 23rd, I believe it was, he was ordered to have 2 weeks to file that appeal. With all due respect to council, I find nothing in the ordinance that gives council the authority to extend the timeline to file an appeal or grant him an additional 14 days. By all measures, he had notice of this issue as of November 25th, I believe it was, I'm sorry, the date of your city council meeting. And so at the very latest, his 14-day timeline should have ran from November 25th. And his failure to file an appeal until January 2nd, frankly, took away authority of the city council or the ZBA to take any action in regards to this issue, because at that point, my client had a right to move forward. The time for appeal had lapsed, and they had a determination from the zoning inspector that this does, in fact, meet the definition of a semi-public use. And then very, very briefly, this
Sir,
is...
your time's up.
Can I finish my sentence?
Finish your sentence.
Thank you. This is a lawful use. You cannot, under Ohio law, exclude a lawful use, and therefore, as was pointed out, council would have to determine that this falls under some category and declare where it's allowed. You simply cannot exclude a lawful use under Ohio law. That would be exclusionary and also in violation of Ohio law. Thank you. And I'd be happy to take any questions that council may have.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the city? Please rise, state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
I'm Lisa Egler, and I live at 146 East Sycamore Street. My property, I've lived there for 25 years, is located 2 feet from the Hope of Haven. 20 feet from my back door. My grandchildren I have full custody of will be playing out there. I do want to make it clear what I understand. This is not a homeless shelter per se, like the Y and like the women's shelter. It is a drop-in shelter. It is only there for them to sleep with no supervision. There is nobody going to be there. And those are 2 separate different things. The Y has people living there. They have kitchens. They have people that are supervising them. This is a drop-in. It's not a homeless shelter. They aren't going to be there 24 hours a day. And I just want you to take into consideration that when I personally spoke with Andy McMahon about this issue, and I asked him if he wanted it in his backyard, his reply was this: complete silence. He never answered my question. So if he doesn't want it in his backyard, why would he think I would want it 2 feet from my property? Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Jared.
233 Wert Street, and what's significant about the street is it's probably very little difference between 233 Wert Street and 233 Market Street. There's nothing particularly special in either street. I wouldn't mind a homeless shelter in my backyard practically. And, let's see, last Saturday at 12:08, a friend of mine put some stuff in my dumpster with my permission. I know it was 12:08 because I saw it on my camera. I can see and hear everything that goes on in my building. So if you want to diminish the value of cameras for security, that's your choice. I know that my front and back door in the building downtown is locked. I know that because my phone tells me. All of that technology is useful and helpful. I think Haven of Hope was smart to hire a lawyer. Thank you. And thank you, Haven of Hope, for picking up the slack. That's my opinion. I helped 13 people last year with mixed results. And I expect that Haven of Hope will have similar mixed results. But it'll be somebody doing something. And out of their pockets, not mine. I'm done.
I'm Ellen Prophet, and I live at 230 North Washington Street. And when I drive by Lisa's house and see how close that is, I think, oh my goodness. But first of all, I want to say I am very much for a homeless shelter, or what it's called, because I do think that we need to help these people, and I'm not against that. I'm just saying the location. And I just want to say what we've been through for the past couple of years, right beside our house, and we live right across from St. Mark's, not the corner, but the next house. And the one south of us there, right by the gas station, has been a drug house. And I mean, it's been horrible what we've seen and the fear that we've had. Our daughter worries all the time because we're old, you know, and she worries about us. And I mean, I could get up in the middle of the night, and some of these people would be almost under my kitchen window, and they were sharing, you know, I'm not a druggie, so I don't know what all, but they were sharing the cigarettes and all, so I assumed what they were doing. And I mean, we saw all kind of things. Well, just a few weeks ago, we had a major drug bust there. And I mean, it was big time. SWAT team from Allen County, and it was something. They drove right up over the curb, up to our step, and the SWAT team did. And we didn't care, you know. We didn't care a bit. We were just glad something was being done about it. So I guess what I would like to say to the committee and to whoever is going to decide about this location, would you want it in your backyards? And it will also hurt the resale of our homes. And we're at the stage where we're going to have to downsize, you know. Okay, I'm done?
Yes, but you can finish your sentence.
Okay, but I would like to say, just think about it before you make your decision and try to do the best thing for all of us, too. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Show of hands.
I would.
Sure.
I'm Tina Baxter. I live at 302 North Market Street on Caddy Corner. Been there since 1991. I just appeal to you that you have to think, do you want this beside you? Do you want this by your property? We've worked very hard to raise our property value up on our home. I mean, I worked hard on my house, hard. And then you're going to take it and you're just going to throw it in the trash. Guarantee it. I'm a real estate agent in Allen County, Fort Wayne, Indiana. I can tell you, if I was to take a client to a home and they were to say, what is that? And I was to say, well, that houses midnight or whatever, you know, the term would be. I can tell you what's going to happen. They're going to turn and they're going to walk the other way. No one is going to buy a house in that area unless it's going to be a rental they don't care about, and they're just going to see the neighborhood turn back down again. I can tell you that my street alone, up till 2 years ago when Ashling then moved in, no one on my street had, it had been the same people since 1991, including the 2 people that rented on that street, who unfortunately 2 of them passed away in a house fire. That's how tight-knitted that neighborhood is. We don't change people a lot in our neighborhood. And I just feel it's a shame that we've worked so hard to raise our property values up. I work hard. I pay a lot of taxes here. And that I'm not against a homeless shelter, I'm not against, it's just not an appropriate place. I just don't think that, I can show you places all over town that are empty. Out there behind Walmart, there where the old Goodwill is, there's empty buildings all over out there, and not near any homes. We just got to take some consideration for us, the taxpayers. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, hearing none, here's my plan. I would like to give everybody a few minutes to think about anything. And the law director's report is coming up. So if anybody has any questions for the law director, I would like to have those come at that time. And then if council wants to vote on this issue, I'd like to do that right after the law director's report. In order to accomplish that, we would need a motion and a second. If I hear no motion and no second, then it's not brought to council tonight. Okay? Everybody understand?
Right. When do you want comments from council, John? After Mr. Hatcher's report?
If you have a comment right now, you're open to comment communication right now.
All right.
If you have questions for Mr. Hatcher, we can wait,
No,
but go ahead.
I do not. First of all, I'm sorry that this has become so contentious. I know I have friends on both sides of this issue, and I'm sorry that it has come to this. And I understand all the arguments, but we are here to decide purely a zoning question. I do not think that whether it's good or bad for the neighborhood, it's a risk or not a risk, or any of those things are issues. I do understand that this is a nonprofit organization, and I appreciate Mr. Nolan's points. I do not think that the points of Mr. Wilson being time-barred or that council exceeded its authority, that this is the proper forum to address those. I think if those are valid issues that you still support, then that probably Judge Birchfield is the place to go for those issues. But the question of whether this is a permitted use under quasi-public use, that I can see where an argument can be made for that. However, I realize that 150.15 goes on to list 19 conditional uses requiring board approval. One of those listed is group homes. I believe a facility that allows anywhere up to 10 people to stay overnight more closely resembles a group home than it does an institution of charitable, philanthropic, or nonprofit nature. And given that position, I at least will not be making a motion to overturn the zoning board. That's my thought on it. I've given it a lot of thought. I've talked to Chris. I've talked to Andy. It's not a position lightly taken. That's all.
Okay. Any other council have comments? Anyone? Mrs. Murgy?
I too have really dug into this and studied it, and if I look at it purely from a zoning issue, we have currently boarding houses, bed and breakfast, clinics are listed as conditional use, and to me, a homeless shelter would fit into more of that category than a quasi-public use. I think that's really stretching it. We have one case where the judge deemed it was semi-public use, but that to me does not change my mind how I view this. I just don't think it's fair. I mean, the purpose of zoning is to it can limit commercial or industrial use of land in order to prevent businesses from building in residential neighborhoods. To have this forced on these residents is just not good judgment. And I will not be supporting, I will not call to overturn what the zoning board has already decided.
Anybody else?
Mr. President, might I be afforded an opportunity to respond to some of the arguments?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, let me say, I understand. I understand exactly what both of the council people are saying. I understand that it's a contentious contentious issue, one on one side. I think we all understand both of the statements of where we stand on this. But I personally believe, and I've looked at this, I've prayed over it, I've thought about it, and I still think that you have to stay within the guidelines of what constitutes this group being in an F3 semi-public, quasi-public. It is charitable, it is philanthropic, and it is a non-profit nature. I honestly, I think that my feeling is that I would overturn the zoning board's decision. I think they didn't take those factors into consideration. They didn't have the amount of time that we've had as a group to really look at this situation. They got it thrown at them one night and they made a decision to say, okay, we're not going to allow it. I don't think they examined closely what all of the issues were involved. So with that, I would definitely be one to oppose to their decision. Thank you.
Mr. Nolan?
Thank you. Just to address a couple of the proposals that this may be viewed as a boarding house, rooming house. If you look at the definition, it says as provided for compensation. We absolutely do not meet that definition. There is no compensation being provided. So you cannot apply just a portion of the definition. You have to apply the law as written. And when you apply the law as written, we don't meet the definition of a boarding house, rooming house, lodging house, or dormitory, because there is no compensation being provided. As to the idea that we fall under the auspices of a group home, that says it's a residential facility that provides room and board. Questionable, there's no meals being served here, so I don't think they qualify under that. Personal care, rehabilitation services, and supervision in a family setting. Okay? We're not providing rehabilitation services. We don't have drug counseling or anything of that sort. That's not part of what we're offering here. This is not what I would consider to be a family setting. It's a group of 10 unrelated males. So again, I don't believe we fall under the auspices of a group home as you apply that definition. The only category that they seem to fall into, as I've gone through this ordinance and I've read it backwards and forwards twice, is a semi-public use. And the only case in Ohio that's addressed that issue agrees with that position. As to the other comments, I can certainly understand people's concern that, as Ms. Berge, if I'm saying it correctly, stated that this shouldn't be in a neighborhood. It's not. It's zoned commercial, B3. Now, it's on the border, but if you look at your zoning ordinance, semi-public uses are a permitted use in every district, including the R1 and R2s. Again, these are issues that the council is free to address going forward. They're free to look at this policy and say, we think our predecessors may not have gotten this right, and we want to change this for the future. But you can't make that law retroactive and make it apply to my client now. As you sit here today, you have to apply the law as written, not as you might want it to be. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from council?
I would suggest, as far as I know, the one court decision we have is not a state, it's not an appellate court or an Ohio State Supreme Court, is that correct?
It's a common pleas court decision, yes.
Thank you.
From Franklin County out of Columbus. So it's not like it came from your court here in Van Wert, but it's still the only authority on the issue in the state. You know, we're a nation of laws, and we look to what is going on within the state, and it's the only authority in the state of Ohio that I was able to find, or Mr. Hatcher was able to find, that's on point. And I can tell you, I have read every single case in the history of Ohio that has the word homeless and zoning in it, and none of them truly address this issue other than the city of Bexley versus Duckworth case that Mr. Hatcher already presented to council several weeks ago, a couple weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
I understand.
Can I ask you a quick question?
You may.
he said they are not going to serve food. I think that they did tell us at the meeting, the two I've been to, that they would have some sort of breakfast in the morning. It might be cookies, donuts, whatever it was. Has that changed? Because you just said they are not going to serve food.
We are not serving meals, whether or not there might be coffee available in the morning or something.
Coffee and donuts is not considered.
Is a possibility, but it's not, it doesn't fall into the idea of providing personal care or rehabilitation services for a group home, nor does it involve compensation for this to be categorized as a boarding house.
Personal care, shower facilities.
Depends on what your definition of personal care might be, ma'am.
Okay.
All right, it's up to the
All right,
board.
we're gonna,
I've got a question real quick, John.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any plans for this facility to provide any sort of rehoming assistance or assistance of any kind toward helping people get a job or anything that, toward some sort of housing or some sort of agreement? No, there's no plans of that, just sleep and leave is what we're looking at.
I would have to defer to Mr. Tomlinson. I'm not familiar.
If I can speak.
Sure.
Certainly. Kurt Tomlinson, 403 East Crawford Street. I'm on the board of Haven of Hope. Our plan is to, we have already developed partnerships with Northwest Ohio Community Action Commission, which provides those services, as well as Love Incorporated here in Van Wert that provides other resources, as well as Community Health Partners that provides health services. We will not provide those services per se, but we will connect the folks that are part of the shelter that stay for longer than 3 nights. They will actually be required, one of the rules will be they will be required to look for a job. They will be required to either apply for jobs or go to Ohio Means Jobs. They will be connected with Love Inc. They'll have to do a full Love Inc. intake. And if you've ever seen that, that's an extensive conversation, hour and a half long. They'll be required to connect with Northwest Ohio Community Action Commission. All of those pieces are in place. We are not equipped to do those, but we have partners who have the resources to do that.
So that being said, that would fall under rehabilitation services, in my opinion.
But we will connect them.
You'll be connecting the dots at your facility, correct?
No, not at their facilities.
They won't be coming into your facility to?
No, the partners, no.
So Love Inc. won't be coming in to offer any assistance of any kind?
No, Love Inc. doesn't, the only way you can do a Love Inc. intake is over the phone.
Okay, so in a sense, we would be offering those services from your facility or helping set up that connection.
In the sense that there's a phone line, but that would mean that anyone here could pick up the phone and we would be saying that we're providing rehabilitation services here at City Council. I don't.
So there's not, I'm just trying to figure out exactly what we're offering here, because what people have been told in certain places and what we've got have been two different things or have been a multitude of things. So I want to make sure that what's being provided allows us to put things in the right definition. So
what is being provided? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that we're trying to put it drop-in center, homeless shelter, group home, where we're trying to classify where this falls.
Sure.
That being said, we need to know exactly what's going on to be able to lay that out. So if there's going to be food, if there's going to be showers, if there's going to be things like that, that's what helps us define this. So we need to know exactly what we're getting.
My understanding is that there will be 10 beds, there will be a shower facility, and there's discussion of possibly providing coffee and or donuts or cookies or something in the morning. That's not been finalized. But I would invite council to look at how are you categorizing the YWCA and the Crisis Care Center. What application has been applied to them, and how are they permitted to operate in the districts that they're operating in, and the same rules should be applied to Haven of Hope. Otherwise, with all due respect, I think council runs afoul of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, because you cannot treat men differently than you're going to treat women without a valid reason to do so.
Mrs. Wilson?
Crisis Care and the YW are residential facilities. They offer counseling, they offer supervision, they offer job services, they offer GED classes. You cannot put them in the same category as Haven of Hope because it's apples and oranges. Haven of Hope is what years ago would have been referred to as a flop house. It is not a residential center. It is not counseling. It is not, if you're gonna offer coffee and donuts in the morning, you need a food service license. Are you prepared to do that?
If that is a requirement of the law, then Haven of Hope will comply with.
No doubt.
In terms of the categorization that IWCA and Crisis Care Supply are somehow different, then I would invite council to provide copies of these conditional use permits that they were provided so that they would have the right to operate in the districts that they're operating in. It's my understanding that no such permits have ever been issued. And if that's the case, then I don't see how you can treat Haven of Hope differently than you're treating the YWCA or the Crisis Care Line.
Okay. I am,
John, just have one very quick comment. I did meet with Andy McMahon on January 6th. He said that Haven of Hope would be providing coffee and possibly granola bars or something similar if those items were donated to Haven of Hope. And he said the plans at that time, at least on January 6th, included 2 showers. So,
my original plan was to, I guess, allow everybody to think about this, but I think we've had lots of time to think about this. Anybody have any other comments to, I guess, say from council?
I would.
Sure.
Just a couple things. First, looking at the 14th Amendment and the due process and equal protection clause, I don't think we're looking to deny men the right for a place to live or the homeless. Again, to me, this comes down to a zoning issue. As I look at the group home and I look at our ordinance, and I understand the frustration that our community is feeling right now, and on both sides, I've gotten it from everybody. But again, 14th Amendment, I don't think we're doing that. I don't think we're trying to deny them. To go along with Mr. Marshall, as I look at ordinance 15.03, and I look at the religious, the charitable, the nonprofit, looking at where do we place this, and I think the best point to be made is we have to go by what the law is now. Not emotions, not thoughts, not feelings, but what is right and what is the law and where does it apply. So I would say today I would probably vote to overturn the zoning board based on that ordinance.
Okay. Mr. Hatcher, do you have anything to add?
I don't know, not unless there's specific questions. I mean, I addressed the council in detail 2 weeks ago, and in writing, I made that public for everybody to see. Whether they've agreed with my opinions or not, I've made that available to everyone. I don't really have anything additional to add at this time. Thank you.
All right, my original plan was to wait and hopefully get a vote on the law, during the law director's report, but I've heard a couple council members note that they, I guess, almost made a motion already. So does anyone want to?
Mr. President, I'll make that motion we vote.
Okay.
And explain how we're going to vote.
Okay, we're going to vote.
How the yes and no vote's going to.
Okay, I have a motion to vote. Do I have a second? By Mr. Marshall. So we are actually voting to overturn the Zoning Board of Appeals decision. So in an overturn, and it's simple majority, a vote yes means that you are in favor of allowing Haven of Hope to operate at the location on North Market Street.
Without a variance.
Without a variance. A vote no
Is withholding, is standing with the zoning board.
is staying with the zoning board, and they are, for lack of a better saying, not allowed to open right now.
So a no vote is staying with
A no
the zoning
vote.
board.
So it's yes, they can open, no, they can't.
Okay.
But in truth, it's yes is overturning the zoning board of appeals decision. No is you agree with the zoning board of appeals. Does everybody got that?
Is there a motion on the floor?
There is a motion by Mr. Egler. There is a second by Mr. Marshall. Are there any other questions from council?
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
If we vote to uphold the zoning board's decision, what is the next step going to be?
That's
Is that one that's
up
gonna-
to the parties.
Well, what could happen?
Okay. Well, if you vote, if the yes vote prevails, then you are saying this meets the definition of a quasi semi-public use, which is a permitted use under B3 zoning, which means they're permitted to, they don't, no, they're just permitted to go ahead and go straight forward. If the vote is a no vote, then a variance would be required. And then the options for Haven of Hope at that point would be either they could apply for a variance or they could appeal to the common pleas court. They would have option, well, yeah, I think they could appeal our decision that way.
Yeah.
They would have exercised all administrative capabilities at that point by coming this far.
So is everybody understanding? Okay, Veronica, please call the roll.
Mr. Egler?
No.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
No?
Mrs. Murgy?
No.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
No.
Noes have it. Okay, administrative reports.
Mr. President, may I ask for guidance from council to explain what classification that they believe Haven of Hope falls into now? Because as we discussed, this is a lawful use, and it cannot just be excluded. So we need some guidance as to what category it is believed that we fall within.
Is this a courtroom or is this a council?
Well, I think it's something that has to be decided.
I already said I thought it was a boarding house. It means more of a.
And I agree,
a boarding house.
and this isn't going to be argued out here tonight now. You guys want to take it to the next level, take it to the next level.
Okay.
With all due respect, I'm sorry. Without any guidance as to what category we fit under the law, we don't know what our next steps are.
You're basically forcing us into litigation. And in that event, we would be making a claim that this is a decision based upon gender. And in that instance, we will be seeking damages and attorney's fees. My client does not wish to proceed down that path. They would like some guidance from council as to where they might be permitted to pursue this activity that is being done at a nonprofit basis for the benefit of the community as a whole. They would like to not waste those limited resources, frankly, paying me to come after the city and possibly take some of the city's resources. That's a plan that my client is not particularly interested in unless they're backed into a corner and have no choice.
No, I don't think it's, hold on. Everybody, I'm speaking, so please, nobody else. We just had a vote, sir. I don't know that council right now, 2 minutes after the vote, is in a position to answer those questions. So what I will do is I will ask my law director to communicate those to you at an appropriate time. And then beyond that, I have a whole other agenda to get to tonight. This is one item on my agenda. I realize it's very important to everybody else in this room, but we do have a city to run also.
Certainly understand that, sir. We only have a 14-day timeline. to make a decision.
Then,
Mr. Nolan, could I have that to you within 72 hours? Would that be
Fantastic.
Would that be appropriate for your timeline? I'll do my best to get that to you in that time period.
Fantastic.
okay, one last comment, sir.
Wayne Hickers, 701 Elm Street. I have 3 questions. Okay, we have a homeless man. Where are their wives and children? Are they at the YWCA? Or are they homeless, they don't have any family? And the second thing, if we're worrying about this getting out, why don't we take that center and put steel cages in them? And then people can just stay in that and we won't have to worry about them roaming the streets at night and such. And the third, if we're so concerned about a restaurant with donuts and stuff in the morning, why don't we get the churches to donate that in the morning? Then you wouldn't have to worry about having a restaurant style license in it. That's my 3 questions. It's,
All right.
it might sound silly, but that's what it seemed like it's getting to be.
Okay, thank you. We're going to continue with our agenda. Everybody in the room may stay, or you may choose to go.
I got Ruggy House in my
I already told him it was going to be way closer to 8.
Okay, all right. Everybody can please walk without talking, please. Administrative reports, Mayor, Mr. Ken Marker.
Thank you. Jay just has a few things that you're going to hear about in executive session.
That's all I have. Okay, any questions for the mayor? Thank you, Ken. Mr. Fleming.
I'll be brief tonight, too. I want to discuss for a minute the Market Street, the building on the northwest corner of Market in Crawford. It's been abandoned for a long time. In a couple of years, we're going to be reconstructing the Market Street Bridge, and it's come into play here that that building is kind of stopping us from doing some of the things that we need to do to make the bridge right. So through ODOT, we've been making an effort to acquire that building. With ODOT, you follow a procedure and where you have to get appraisers and appraisal reviewers involved, and you come up with a fair market value. The fair market value for the building is established at $16,700. We've had an attorney negotiating and trying to get the building, and obviously that's not enough money. But that was just for the building, so if we take the building down to build the bridge, that still leaves a strip of property that the owner would maintain. So we've offered $2,646 as a fair market value for the remaining piece of ground. So basically, at the end of the day, we could take the building down and have the whole property. Well, in the process of negotiation, we have worked through an offer up to $35,000 to acquire that building. To this date, that has been unsuccessful and that's been rejected. So now, in the ODOT protocol to acquire property for municipal purpose, we're moving on to a step called appropriation, which is where Mr. Hatcher will file documents in court and we'll proceed down that path to take the building, at which point we revert back to the $19,000 offer will be our offer for the building. The judge may decide that $19,000 is appropriate and we could get it for that. However, there's about a $15,000+ issue of redoing appraisals, preparing for court, that we're going to be right back to the $35,000. So the reason I'm saying this is because tonight we want to make an addition to the permanent budget of $35,000 to be able to have money in place to take care of this appropriation, or to take care of the building acquisition. We would hope that we could get that offer to be accepted, we would write the check and it would be our building, but we got to be prepared to go the other route. So
It's basically $35,000 no matter how you slice it. It's either that's the offer, or if we have to litigate, that would become sunk costs at that point.
Right.
So the $35,000 is, we're not tied to that in any way. If we go to litigation, they're not going to use that as a baseline.
No, $19,000 is the
They're gonna do
baseline.
Okay, you've already
Yeah,
got that.
yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I missed
but
that.
the problem is, the other money over and above that would get sunk into
Right.
a new appraisal that would have to be presented for court.
Right.
A good portion of that money.
Right.
And so it would become, just, instead of.
Right. Instead of paying
an
to
offer,
litigate, we're
it-
just writing the check.
Correct.
So it's important tonight that the minutes reflect that we're prepared to pay $35,000 for the building and that we're also prepared to move on to appropriation.
Yeah, on the eminent domain.
On the eminent
complaint.
domain, of course, yeah. So, and we'll see where that goes, and I'll certainly keep you posted on where it goes over the next few weeks.
Just, that building has been vacant and unused and unable to be used for recent memory, right? I mean, I don't remember the last
owner paid
time.
$9,500 for it at a sheriff's auction.
It was, the last I recall about 15 years ago, it was being used as a rental property. It might have been used a little more
And it's-
recently than that, but not much.
Not much. Couple
Okay.
of apartments upstairs. Yeah.
Just want to make sure that I'm got the right building in my mind, that there's been nothing in that building
And
for
In defense of ODOT, the fair market value seems high to me, but it's a conglomeration of a lot of comparables and what that property's worth if the building, you know, was renovated, and they take a lot of things into account. And I mean, basically, when ODOT forces you through their procurement procedure, they're doing it to prepare not to lose in court. So that's why things are lined up to, they don't lose.
So they're saying it's worth 19. We
Yeah.
offered 35.
Right.
And the owner said no.
Right.
Okay.
And I hate to be the, but that building is probably, if we'd sweep that building tonight or tomorrow, I bet you'd find needles in there and people sleeping in it. And if we swept that building, so we should have took that building as a nuisance 5 years ago. Instead of paying money, that building should have been filed as a nuisance, and we've owned it 5 years ago. We let that, why we let it go on, I don't know.
Anything else,
That's
Jay?
all I have to report.
Any questions for the Safety Service Director? Thank you, Jay. Auditor, Mrs. Martha Belliot.
I really don't have anything to report, other than you mentioned that the auditors are here. I do have a couple of changes to the permanent appropriations that I sent out, and my plan is, prior to the third reading, I'll send out all the final changes. Nothing big, a couple things that we forgot to put in, and this 35,000 is, I think, the next biggest thing that's in there. So before the third reading, I will send out a final draft, and then we can answer any questions at that meeting. That's all I have.
Any questions for the auditor? Thank you, Martha. Law Director, Mr. John Hatcher.
Thank you. After what we just went through, does anybody have any questions?
What do you need from us to offer him what he needs?
Well, for the 4 no votes, I will, basically, what do you believe it qualifies under?
I think
Just, you can email that to me.
I think
I mean, it's, because I don't think all 4 of you have the same definition. I think there might be, between the 4 of you, maybe 2 different definitions, but I want to make sure I have what it is. Obviously, the 3 yes votes believe it qualified under a semi or quasi-public use. I will turn those over to Mr. Nolan within the 72 hours, so please email that to me, preferably tomorrow.
So what can we expect from him now?
Well, can we expect? Well, he has 2 options. They can apply for a variance, or he can file in common police court. And obviously, he's threatened to come after us for an equal protection violation, which, if proved, there are the possibility of punitive damages and attorney's fees. But he has to prove that our decision was based solely upon gender. Not always the easiest claim to make. He could claim that we were wrong and prevail on other issues other than that, and prevail there, and still not make his equal protection argument. So, just so you all understand that, I mean, it is a claim that would be available to him in an appeal to the common police court. He's going to bring every claim he believes he has. He has to. So it could be brought. And the other factor that could mean is if he brings an equal protection claim, it could potentially be filed in federal court, the federal district court in Toledo, instead of being filed in the Van Wert Common Police Court. And I want to do a little more research on that before I go into deep detail on that. I mean, I'm speaking a little off the cuff, so I may, with a little research, revise my opinion on that. But equal protection argument opens that door. So for all of us involved, it could be an interesting ride going forward. So, but I do need specifically what you think it does qualify under, so I can pass that along. Plus, it'll help me put together any, start putting together anything I would need in representation of the city.
Okay.
John, I'm not
Yes, sir.
sure. He wants us to provide an opinion of what a homeless shelter would qualify under?
The question he asked was a valid question, and it's, if it doesn't meet a quasi or semi-public use, what does it mean?
Where would you put it, basically?
How would you define it?
And if I define it as a group home, then
Then that's your answer. That's
I
your.
don't have to tell them what I think it.
You don't need anything more than that.
No, you don't. No, I'm not asking for anything more than that.
Right.
You know, I'm not asking for anything more than that.
Okay.
Okay? Because that's really that was his question. And
Okay, I
Karen
thought it was
said-
asking us to tell them where it could be.
Pardon?
Will there be a variance with that?
Well, that's up to them now.
That would be up to them.
The ball's in their court now.
But some of those do require variances and not looking at both of them in detail, they would have different requirements than a quasi or semi-public use.
But to go back to the variance board now, it would have to be a request, a different request than what they've already heard.
Right.
Yeah, it may not,
Well, it would be if, I'm just making it up, if the only offer was, we think you're a group home, an option would be to ask for a variance as a group home.
correct.
Because they
They would have to
they
be,
have not
they would
yet
have to
done that.
request a variance under something other than what they've tried to qualify themselves under currently.
Yes,
Which
they
was
have not yet
philanthropic.
asked
Correct.
for
So
a
that,
variance.
so the two things I've heard from the members that voted, that are no votes, were group home and boarding house. So they would have to apply for a variance under one of those. And that's the only, to keep it from not going to common pleas court or any other court from here, that's the route they would have to take.
So
Okay.
that's not what they're gonna do.
Yeah, well, but that's,
I mean,
but that's the only way, that's the only way it makes any sense, because if not, it's already been litigated. It's already been administratively.
So group home carries different provisions in the code.
Yeah.
There's
Group home
a
does serve as a
second-
boarding house.
Well, but more than the definition. There's more
Well,
variance under.
It's simply so if they say, we're gonna call it a group home,
Right.
they've gotta go back to the zoning board to get a variance to run a group home in that location.
Right.
That's it.
If that's so requires. I believe it does, but.
Yeah, because
No, but
there's a separate.
But right now, the
section.
ball's completely in their court, and
Right.
he will wait until Mr. Hatcher gives him
Whatever he-
the
So
information,
then
and
is
then
it
we'll.
back to an emotional issue about I don't want it in my backyard? Yes.
It's always been.
Well, I mean, been from the beginning. Yeah, that's what it's been from the beginning.
No,
So
I-
regardless of what we want to call it, or where it belongs, you still got the same basic argument.
Correct.
And so,
Well-
we're back to square one again.
We're not gonna solve it tonight. We need to wait. We need to wait and figure out what Haven of Hope decides to do. We can
Yeah, 'cause-
debate and argue this all night long. We've debated it and argued it quite a bit. We had a first and a second. Council decided to side with the zoning board of appeals. As of right now, until we know what Haven of Hope is going to do, the issue is dead for us.
What about
It's
the-
decided.
What about this, are we gonna have to come up with what is an ordinance, or
Well,
are we
we
going to
can-
decide where does something like that fit?
We
At
are
some
not
point-
allowed to change the law right now.
No, I just say, I say in the
Until-
future.
Yes, in the future,
I mean, we're gonna have to get that classified, not tonight,
in the
no.
future, yes, we can, but we can't, it can't be addressed with this situation. So,
It is.
anything else, Mr. Hatcher?
Well, I lost my train of thought on anything else.
Just say my report is done.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. No other questions are allowed for Mr. Hatcher. Any questions for the law director?
Seriously, is there any questions for me? Thank you.
Okay, community reports, health service and safety, Mr. Bill Marshall.
Quick report, 12 code violations in the last month, 8 are open, nothing major. I would ask to have a 15 minutes meeting with the council next time to discuss code violations.
Before council or during?
Oh, I'm sorry, before.
So that would be first Mondays, no, that
March
would be March 9th? Okay,
Yeah, that's our next meeting.
all right. So 6:15,
Well, wait a minute.
health.
Do we already have something scheduled that day?
No, we don't.
Bill, what are we going to discuss?
We're going to discuss code violations and the dollar amounts.
And habitual offenders, maybe?
Yes,
You
all of
think-
those things.
I think it's going to take longer.
I don't want to take up
I'm
any
asking-
more of our time.
I think it's
We can
going
bring
to
it
take,
up in the office or in the,
I think it's going to take longer than 15-minute meeting.
that's to start with.
Okay, it's your committee.
Okay.
Anything else? Is that it?
I'm done, I'm
Okay.
sorry. That's.
Any questions for Mr. Marshall?
Is that a committee meeting or council that's meeting at 6?
Committee meeting, it's his committee.
Okay.
You know, council's welcome, but it's
Understand.
his committee.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Cowles.
Got a few things here. Coming from Stacy, Van Wert Economic Development received the Crystal Image Award at the Chamber of Commerce Annual Dinner, recognizing a member that demonstrates leadership in the community through business responsibility, productivity, employee empowerment, and service to the community. Councilman Agler had identified a target property for the land bank at 327 South Vine Street. They've been working on this acquisition of the property for a couple of months and received notice last week that probate issues have been resolved, and they are working with the owners now on the acquisition. Also, classes on creating a business plan begin on Thursday at the Economic Development Office. Last week they had 13 people. This is actually took a couple of students to this a few years back. So it looks like we've got 13 individuals interested in starting or expanding a business. So, anybody interested? And I think I said this last meeting, they will be attending a regional meeting with Jobs Ohio on March 3rd for the announcement of statewide site incentives for industrial sites. They're especially interested in learning what impact that would have on the possibility of erecting maybe another spec building in Van Wert. So, a lot going on in the economic development.
All right, and your report is a perfect example. I'm going to make a request of all council members.
I was going to email that to her.
Yes. Our meetings tend to be going longer and longer and longer, and it's difficult for the clerk and myself to kind of take enough notes and remember. We certainly have the video, but that's time consuming also. So I would ask if you could, please, if you have a report, just email the language from the report to Veronica, either before council or within 24 hours afterwards, just to save time and to make sure that that we get everything correct. So that would be very helpful, especially long reports like that. And if your report is no report, you can save yourself the email. She can get that. Just would help. It takes her a long time to get everything right, and then I don't always have the best memory when I'm reading the minutes. Any questions for Mr. Cowles? Thanks, Jeff. Mr. Penn, Parks and Recreation.
Parks and Rec has no report tonight.
There you go. You don't need to email that. Good job. Mr. Egley.
I have a couple things. We had, earlier this evening, we had a joint property equipment and finance to talk about the heating in the building and how we're going to pay for it. And it was decided that we're going to, we got some bonds, we're going to buy our own bonds, save interest, and it was discussed in the meeting. So I want to have an ordinance prepared that would, for the issuance of the sale of bonds and for $968,710 for the purpose of paying for the heating.
And on an emergency.
Yeah, on an emergency.
Okay.
I think that was already asked for, though, at the last meeting.
Was it asked for?
I looked and it wasn't in here in 12.
Not the bonds.
The bonds wasn't, I don't
Was
think.
it?
The Honeywell portion of it was
Yeah,
asked for last meeting.
Yeah.
We didn't do the bonds.
I had it in my email to
Wait,
Jeff
let me
that,
see. Let me verify real quick. Hold on. Finance. Nope, you're right. Martha's right.
duh.
It just wasn't on the agenda.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
We
for
already have
reminding
the
me.
motion. We'll take care of it. We'll take care of the first reading during resolutions and ordinances.
And the second one's in there too, then, too, the, for the permanent
Permanent
appropriations,
budget.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That concludes my report.
Yeah, right here. Yes, so the reason for that is 11 was mistakenly omitted from the agenda.
Okay.
That was the amendment to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay,
That was my oversight.
okay.
Any questions for finance? Thank you, Jeff. Judiciary and annexation, Mrs. Joy Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Evidently, when we started talking to Mr. Gary Hunter regarding the placing the charter city question on the ballot, we did not have the legislation in place that would permit the mayor to enter into, or sign the contract with them. So I would like to request an ordinance be prepared to authorize the mayor to sign that contract with the Ohio Municipal Attorneys Association Service Corporation, and that it be prepared on an emergency basis.
Okay, we have a motion to allow the mayor to sign a contract on an emergency basis. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Callis. I missed this too. We approved the dollar amount through the budget, but we never actually approved the mayor to sign the
I
contract.
think we might have requested it, and then when
the timing got all mixed up.
discovered the timing was incorrect, then we never
So what
pursued it.
So what we'll need to do, assuming this goes through, is if you would, please ask Gary for a new date.
Yeah,
the new date. So we have a motion and a second. Motion to prepare. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Igler?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Law Director has prepared ordinance 12-02-007. I'd like to introduce that ordinance before council.
Motion to introduce 007. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Marshall. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Igler?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Since this ordinance was prepared on an emergency basis, I'd like to request statutory rules be suspended.
Motion to suspend statutory rules, second by Mr. Marshall. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Igler?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
And finally, I'd like to ask that ordinance 12-02-007 be passed on its first and final reading.
Motion to pass on first and final, second by Mr. Egler. Please call, or read the ordinance and call the roll.
Ordinance number 12-02-007, an ordinance to authorize the mayor to sign a contract with the Ohio Municipal Attorneys Association Service Corporation as a consultant regarding placing the charter city question before voters in the November 2020 general election and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Igler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
All right, and we're gonna make a grammatical fix on that. It actually should be, it should be 20-02-007. That's,
Oh.
so, because it's not,
I didn't even
it's
know
not
that.
2012. It should be 20. I apologize.
Do we have to go through this?
No, I don't want to. It's a typo. We'll fix it on the final copy.
Okay.
I apologize. I didn't even catch it until right
I
now.
didn't see it either.
Okay, that concludes my report.
I need to go home. All right, any questions for Mrs. Murky? Thank you, Joy. Mr. Hellman, Streets and Alleys.
All right, I've got a couple things. Ordinance number 20-02-006, that was prepared last week. I would like to amend that as an emergency.
Okay, motion to amend 20-02-006 to add the emergency language. Second by Mr. Egler. Please call the roll.
Yes. Sorry.
Hellman, Egler.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Kenton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, I would now like to motion to introduce this ordinance before the council.
Okay, motion to introduce 006. Do I have a second? Mr. Callis? Please call the roll.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 2002-014 that has already been prepared, and I would like to introduce this ordinance before council as well.
Okay, motion to introduce. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Marshall. Please call the roll. Oh, wait.
You just did that.
I
You
just
already
did that.
Just a different, he's reading.
Motion to suspend. Did you say you introduce?
He's on a different ordinance.
Yeah.
That last one was 06.
The last one.
We need to run that all the way through. It can't be on the,
Are we going to?
so you need to
Are we
suspend the
do-
rules.
Suspend the rules.
Oh.
If you want to pass
sorry.
tonight, so
No, okay.
you need to
That was
suspend the
my
rules.
fault. That was my fault.
You're messing me up.
I'm just glad you're paying attention.
I'm not.
I would like to make a motion for the statutory rules to be
Okay,
suspended.
motion to suspend rules. Second by Mr. Marshall. Please call the roll. 006.
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, and then ordinance 006, I would like for it to be passed on its first and final.
All right, motion to pass 006 on first and final. Second by Mr. Egler. Clerk, please read the ordinance and call the roll.
Ordinance number 20-02-006, an ordinance to authorize the safety service director to advertise for bids and award contracts to the lowest and best bidder for the 2020 street painting and declaring an emergency. Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to introduce 014 before council.
That's on
We're gonna do that
yeah.
during resolutions and
Oh, are we?
ordinances at the end. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all the way at the end.
So then,
And 009 is part of the consent agenda, so we will run that through with the other
all right,
ordinances on it.
perfect.
Anything else?
I don't know what's on it.
All right. Is there any questions for Mr. Hellman? Thanks, Steve. Property and equipment, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not have any report.
Okay, any questions for property and equipment? Thank you. Unfinished business, we'll leave those as is. Is there any new business to come before council this evening?
Yeah. Did you ask about the trash? Trash day for, you don't want to ask?
No, not yet. I don't have the paper with me, Jeff, so if you've got it, I don't have the information in front of me.
Well, Young's Trash contacted me, wanting to put another trash day together in April. I think it's the 25th. Look and see if that ain't a Saturday. And it's, he's gonna charge us so much a car instead of weighing, because, he's gonna get more cars in there that way.
Okay.
And he's,
He also requested a police between the hours of 12 and 1.
11:30 and 12.
11:30 to 12.
Yeah, because I guess you had trouble. I mean, we could have a committee meeting on it the next six.
Okay, the 25th is a Saturday. So,
And all he wants is appliances in this one. No TVs, no, just appliances. Hot water heaters, stoves, washers, refrigerators. And then later on in the fall, he'll have another one where it's, because what he's trying to do is get through as many as he can. He don't want to, like he done last time, had to shut everybody off.
okay. Did he provide either one of you a
Yeah.
contract offer that you can bring at the next
Not a
meeting?
contract, just a flyer on it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which
well,
will
we
look
can,
like what we got last time.
right,
Yeah.
we can talk about it. Yeah, if you could bring
We
that
had a
next time.
contract, we had a contract.
I know, but the
Yeah.
dates and the times and the, whatever he is willing to do, and then we can
Yep.
work on a contract. So, yeah, if you could bring that back, and, we can look at the April 25th date and make the determination about, police or whatever. Okay, we do have 3 ordinances on the consent agenda, 05, 08, and 09. So I need a motion to introduce the consent agenda.
Motion to introduce.
Motion to introduce by Mr. Davis. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Egler. Please call the roll.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Akler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda, I need a motion to suspend the rules for the consent agenda. Mr. Egler, second by Mr. Davis. Please call the roll.
Mr. Akler?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, a motion to pass the consent agenda on first and final. Mr. Egler, second by Mr. Davis.
Hellman?
No, Egler,
Oh.
Davis. Please read each ordinance and then call the roll.
What is this?
Your resolution numbers here.
Oh, wait, this circle. Okay.
Showing you which ones.
Resolution number 20-02-005, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to bid and award contracts for the replacement and installation of new lift stations and declaring an emergency. Resolution number 20-02-008, a resolution to participate in the Ohio Department Recreational Trails Program and authorizing the Safety Service Director to execute all documents to participate in said program and declaring an emergency. Ordinance
Actually,
number.
spell it correctly on
Is
that.
it?
Fix that.
Okay. Recreation?
Yeah, we
Okay. Ordinance number 20-02-009, an ordinance for the city of Van Wert to approve preliminary legislation for paving work to be completed on US Route 227, US Route 224, State Route 118, and State Route 709, to grant the mayor the authority to enter into any agreements with the Department of Transportation in the furtherance of said project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Okay, resolutions and ordinances.
Okay.
Yep.
Am I just reading it? First reading for everything?
This would be the second reading, so yes.
Second reading. This is the second reading for ordinance number 20-02-010, a resolution by the Van Wert City Council authorizing the Safety Service Director to negotiate an energy efficiency and infrastructure improvement contract with Honeywell International Incorporated with a goal to retrofit the municipal building.
And declaring an emergency. That was on the amended agenda.
All right, Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Akler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Thank you. And this is the second reading for ordinance number 20-02-011, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the aggregate principal amount of $968,710 for the purpose of paying costs of improving HVAC and lighting facilities at the municipal building and declaring an emergency.
That's only the first reading.
Oh, is it the first reading? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Akler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Thank you. And for the 14th. this is a second reading for ordinance number 20-02. Wait, are these all one?
This would be the second reading.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ordinance number 20-02-012, an ordinance to make permanent.
That's the first reading.
No, it's the first reading.
First reading?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
What is wrong with me?
I don't know, and I thought the first one on the Honeywell thing, I thought that was the first reading too.
It should be, yeah.
Yeah, because they weren't on my agenda last time.
Okay, I apologize. It's,
Do I need to change anything?
no, you don't need to.
Okay,
You just need to make sure in the minutes it says.
In the minutes?
yes,
First reading.
thank you. First reading for ordinance number 20-02-012, an ordinance to make permanent appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures for the city of Van Wert, Ohio, from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Abler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
This is the first reading for resolution number 20-02-014, a resolution authorizing the safety service director to bid and award contracts for miscellaneous paving projects in the city of Van Wert, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Abler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
All right. Now I need a motion to enter executive session to discuss a
I'll make
contract.
that motion.
The paving one, we're not doing, that was the first reading?
014, yeah, 014 is the second reading, correct? Is that what you're saying, Jay?
No, I think
Oh.
it
No, they're all
would be the
first
first
reading.
reading, but I
Were they
thought it was going
Yeah,
through
they're all
tonight.
first reading, because I just
Oh,
prepared.
you want to go through
Yeah,
tonight?
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can put out for bid.
Yeah.
Okay. So now it's back to you, Mr. Hellman.
Help me, it was on the consent agenda.
1-4?
No, what?
No,
No,
149.
Oh, I'm sorry. I,
The top of the
I didn't
third
turn the
page.
page correct.
He didn't see where it says resolution.
We're having all kinds of problems.
This is one of them nights.
Well, yeah.
This isn't our A game.
I thought it was gonna be.
Do you want it, do you need it
No, I
done
need to run
tonight?
through, yes.
Mr. Hellman,
Sorry,
we need to
Steve,
run
yeah,
through. So please, motion to suspend the rules
Motion to suspend the rules
for 014.
for 014.
Okay, do I have a second?
Yep.
Mr. Egler?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Abler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Now, motion to
Motion to
pass on
the-
second and final. 'Cause
Second
We just
and
voted
final.
on it the first time.
Of 014.
Okay, second by Mr. Egler. Second and final. That was Jay's fault.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Abler?
Yes.
Gotta read it. You gotta read
Oh.
it. You've got to read it first. Here you go.
Yeah, we're all falling apart.
Resolution number 20-02-014, a resolution authorizing the safety service director to bid and award contracts for miscellaneous paving projects in the city of Van Wert, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Abler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, now Jay has his ordinance. Now we need to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Egler to enter executive session, second by Mr. Hellman. Please call the roll.
Mr. Abler?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Okay, enter executive session at 8:10.